something I really like about that, which is the fact that we've actually put it to real life users of all sorts of ages and groups, and that's applying great technology to solutions that we need to solve every day. And when you think about it, most people are verbal as opposed to typing. So again, the more we can use generative AI technologies in the most natural way possible to get people to engage in very clever technology, all the better. Let me introduce you to Ryan Ballantyne, Cloud Solution Architect for Options, and he's going to walk us through public versus private AI usage, and he's going to use the financial sector or the financial institutions as his case study and the outline of his talk today. Please welcome him on stage as our final talk as part of our AI and software engineering track. Welcome, Ryan.
All right, thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be here. It's great to actually see real-life examples from, the MOT Centre and drones. Like, that's just unbelievable. One thing I want to talk to you about today is, and it's quite fitting, we're actually at the last presentation here, is security, public versus private AI. That's something we do with Options, is that we're actually, pretty much a private compute provider, also within public compute, AWS, Azure, things like that. But the main thing that we do is the private sector and the private compute in data centers itself. So I work primarily with the public cloud, AWS and Azure. I also work with the private cloud, but that also is, ultimately the hybrid cloud that we work in as well. And I want to start with why we need to understand the landscape. Essentially, at the moment, I was at a conference a few weeks ago, months ago, and there was an accounting firm that said to them, all their employees and their clients, just upload all their data to ChatGPT, tabular data, and it just works. It's brilliant. But the main thing I think what is fitting here today to end with this is, where actually is the data? Who owns the data? Where is it? They might say it's actually stored somewhere and you can believe it, but at Options, we don't really know. And that's why we're in the private compute space as well. So what have we seen in the landscape recently with our clients, people who've come to us, is used to be everybody wanted to get to the cloud. AWS, Azure, just get us there in the next 10 years. We need out of there. And that came from regulators, it came from investors, it came from people who needed availability zones, for example, in one region, not in one data center. But actually what's happened now for us is we're seeing all this money being pumped into AI, for example, but there's no real clear path, right? Everyone in this room probably has a clear path of what they want to do. Some of our clients and prospects have no real path, they just need to get it done. I need AI, what does that even mean? Like, what do you want? One big thing we've seen is Copilot. We did see, the Power Platform, Copilot being mentioned earlier. I probably should have got Copilot to make these slides because they're very basic, but they'll do the job. But it's £19 a month, but what actual value does it give? It doesn't really give me much value for what I do. I'm in Visual Studio every day, in Azure, but actually for the back office, Copilot's a perfect example. But £19, I've seen some names from PwC here, hundreds of thousands of employees. That's a big bill at the end of the month. And one thing we've taken from the Vesper white paper is 70% of enterprises prepare to run AI models on their own infrastructure and hardware. So there is a direction in the industry to actually move stuff into the private cloud. We've seen recently with OpenAI, pressured into open source, for example. Sam Altman actually came out and read it and replied to someone and said, yeah, I think we've got our strategy wrong there. And that just shows how big the large open source community is within the landscape. And we've seen this even today. Further analysis from last week is the Llama, Behemoth, and Maverick being released. And we'll go into sort of like the hardware you can run those on and like how it's got cheaper over time. And then the benefit of these sort of things, open source technology, is you've got Cursor, Abacus AI, things like that you can use in your code editors. And they're actually hitting 100 million in revenue now, so there's benefits to these things. But ultimately, the thing is, do you really know who you're talking to? Where's your data going? And where is it? One big thing I'll say about the financial sector is these are the most scared people in the world. It's all about alpha. I think if you've seen from the VIX this week, in terms of volatility, it's a major problem because you need the alpha. You need to be at the top. You don't need anyone else knowing what your data is. So closed or open source, so everybody in this room knows what this is. We'll fly through this. So closed source refers to restrictions of source code. Why is that? It's proprietary IP, it's monetization. If you download a Python package, for example, you know that there's going to be vulnerabilities or backdoors. You hear of all the horror stories in the industry. You know who wrote the code. And then in terms of let's say, closed source, we'll talk about Azure, OpenAI, ChatGPT, and Microsoft. Ultimately, you don't need to host these things. So that's a big factor with us. We would see, obviously, we're in the private compute space. We need to buy things, we need to patch it, we need to rack it, we need to get it into a cab in the data center. And those things take time. You can go into, as you've seen earlier on, POCs are a perfect example for the sort of, playgrounds that we see in Azure OpenAI. Go in 4 days, POC it, job done, and then we can actually bring it to the forefront in the private sector. One thing we do know, and it's confirmed, is if you do an API request with DeepSeek in the public version, there is some sort of APIs going out to China, and that doesn't sit right with some regulators' data sovereignty. It's actually in the terms and regulations as well on their website that they store the stuff in China, which is a big thing at the minute, especially if you ask Trump. The other thing is OpenAI partnership with Microsoft. Again, they tell us they're not doing anything, but are they? Who knows? We're a big Microsoft outfit as well, so like we use Microsoft ourselves, but we always have to have that in the back of our mind. And there's just some silly photographs. Obviously, ChatGPT on the left with Llama, and Claude, the reasoning model, didn't really get it. And then obviously open source, been honestly the most crucial part of development and computing. And I always see this as, like everybody in the room here today, your first web app, your first application, the reason you have your job is probably because of open source and any packages that you've done there. And the benefits of this are transparency of data, community contributions, modifying other code bases, and then obviously driving innovation further. You can see bottom left is TensorRT from NVIDIA, and that's how we develop or bring up inference with NVIDIA GPUs, if anybody's worked with that, and then obviously VLLM for maximizing the compute and performance and memory runtimes of those AI systems. And you would only really get that if you're actually working with the system itself, i.e. the actual GPU. Whereas Azure, AWS, they do that all for you. So the time to market with AWS and Azure, 100%, let's go for it. But actually, if you want systems that are completely private, segregated, you kind of need these things. And the fact that they are open source, brilliant. Like, you couldn't do it without it. You'd have to build your own systems and forget about that again. So on to public or private. So what I'm referring here to is, public AI, open AI, stuff that you don't control. For example, Claude, all the models there. Private, we host it all internally. That's what I'm referring to here. Biggest thing about public is all of us today can go to Claude, sign up for $20, $20, and you get started. 100%, let's just go. And that's brilliant for, I want to go to Berlin this weekend. Tell me the top 10 tourist attractions. Oh, I need a recipe for bolognese. Brilliant. Like, it helps day-to-day life, right? But again, going back to the accountant that put in tabular data of his client's P&L, for example, like, you don't know where that's going. Like, my views, you could be arrested for that. You don't like it. You have you have a duty to that sort of client that that the data is going to be safe, for example. Access to all models. You've seen them mentioned Abacus AI. You don't even have to be in ChatGPT or Claude anymore. You have access to all models and you pay for them, which is brilliant. API access is so cheap. But again, it's back to the data sovereignty of it. Exposing data externally. Regulated, unverifiable, whereas it's no ownership of the actual infrastructure, which is bad and good for the end user. You can get spun up in literally 2 minutes, but actually you don't own the underlying infrastructure. So when we move on to the private side of things, is we've seen this week that Llama models now being released, but the actual limiting factor for people actually run them locally. You can run these things on your laptop in an airplane if you wanted, but like it's going to be slow. It's not going to give you much. But now you can actually run these on the H100 chips, which you can see in the middle here. And these, again, are really, really good. But the problem is, it's still steep. You could probably get a refurb one on eBay for 20 grand, for example. It's not cheap. And you can't expect a solicitor firm with 50 employees down the road to do that and have the expertise. So things like that you would need. And even the best example is this, is when DeepSeek came out, it was 32 billion parameters. But the actual version was 640 billion parameters. And that is a colossal amount of compute to actually run that and get what the performance they said it was. Yeah, so essentially it's high CapEx for users or for firms, and then you also need the expertise, and that's in high demand at the moment as well. And we go on to security, and which this is sort of what we've built our platform at Options with, which I'll show you in a few slides, is called Horizon, which is a privately based data analysis and high performance compute platform that has access to market data. So quant users, hedge funds, their biggest problem is getting data. And we have that all in one place. And what's the next best thing in the industry at the moment? AI. So we can do anything from the network packet tracing and analyze that, tell me when Berkshire Hathaway stopped trading on the 23rd of February, for example. You don't want a junior analyst going through all those little nitty-gritty things. Get the LLM to do it. And to be honest, in the industry, machine learning, AI has been a thing before we even knew it was. They're always at the top of their game. You don't need to read the books, like the quants, Ed Thorpe, Jim Simons. They're always ahead of the game, so they're already into this space. And then just to end on that is data integrity. It does get sent to other clouds. Do we know it gets sent to other clouds? What are they doing with it? They might not be doing anything with it, right? But you always have to have that question mark in the back of your head. And we've heard from other people today, ethics, security, we need to be at the forefront to say, hey, what's actually happening with this data? This is just a quick study from the FCA and the Bank of England. I think it's pretty fitting. It's from January 2025. And I'll just pick out 2 points from this. So the top left is 75% of firms in the financial space are using AI, and 10% plan to invest over the next 3 years. Like, in my opinion, there's far more. A lot of our clients are doing that as well. We're all in the financial space. Everybody wants a piece of it. But the bottom left here you see is 84% of firms have a person accountable for AI. So ultimately, firms are now realizing that they need to be accountable for their AI. They need to make sure that, we've talked today about users that use ChatGPT, but they shouldn't be at work. Going through a desktop, if you're in Hong Kong, for example, where ChatGPT is not enabled, you can actually get through maybe a virtual desktop that's in the UK, for example, and access it that way. So there's small things that people need to be accountable in the firm for. And we talked about the EU Act and things like that have come into power this year, which is great to see because we're actually staying on top of things for a change. So what I'll leave you guys on today is higher options technology leveraging open source models. And don't get me wrong, we do use the public models ourselves. But what we've realized is that we've got internal solutions. We've got a support team across the globe, 200 people wide. We're a 600 people firm. But actually, we've got such a database of our clients and their issues, and I'm sure about everybody else here today. But we didn't want to pump that into Claude. We didn't want to pump that into ChatGPT, for example, because it's our data, it's collated, it's our proprietary IP. So we actually have an internal system that I've mentioned earlier called Horizon that is able to distinguish using RAG, using segmentation, things like that actually says, hey, what is my problem for our support team? Now, the only downside to that is that we have to build the tools, obviously, so we need the expertise there. It's not as easy as the Power Automate platform that was able to just plug straight into Teams, webhook, jobs done, that kind of thing. But that's the main thing that we've seen at Options here. And the main thing for our clients is, because we're in the financial sector, we deal with quant firms, hedge funds, the biggest banks in the world. These guys go through especially in the banks, you have to go through 10 people before something actually gets approved. So even if you wanted to roll out, say, ChatGPT, it could be weeks, months, because the banks are so stringent and they're so scared. So we talk about data privacy, we talk about boundaries, making sure there's no leakage of the AI itself, ownership. They want to own these things. So if we take a quant firm, for example, high frequency, they're beside the exchange. They are literally getting the first packet in there. And that's what they need. But where do they need the LLM, for example, if they're using LLM? It's not going to be in Iceland where the frequency or the latency is a little bit longer. And for inference, you don't really need latency, but these guys want it in the data center in the metropolitan area of New York. And that's exactly what we've done. So we put it in the colos beside New York, London, where all the big stock exchanges are. And that means that our clients can actually facilitate AI within the private sector, within some of the most tightly knit data centers in the world. And the most hotly, people pay a lot of money to be in those data centers because of the data they can get. You just see on the right here, Horizon is horizon.options-it.com. It's free to use. You can go in for a Gmail account. We have single sign-on and stuff set up with that, and we have live clients on it. The big thing here is that we have market data pumped into the system as well, so you can request market data, whatever that is, and it's clean market data in different data formats. Some of the challenges that we've actually seen along with you guys is we have market data in different formats. It's real time, it's tick data. You probably all heard from the volatility over the last few days, what that actually is. And we've seen our systems, being pumped up by that. Big thing about market data is that it comes in different formats. People want it in different dates, blah, blah, blah. And we've had to adjust our AI systems to be able to read that data. What is it they want? Tabular data, how do you ingest it in using certain storage types. We'd heard, like some of the guys who did a demo using blob storage, for example, and it was slow, or it wasn't, or the text recognition was slow. So we've had to do that as well, especially with on-premise storage as well. So making sure everything is as fast as it can be. But ultimately, the whole system itself is built for hedge funds, quant users, and essentially to connect any of your data into the systems, whilst also spinning up compute on demand in the private metropolitan areas, Visual Studio, all the sort of IDEs, things like that, and API integrations. So yeah, that's a brief overview of Horizon. I could have given a demo of it, but I thought it was better to end on something about security and the fact that there are other things to look at in the industry itself, not just spinning things up in Azure, because that is a genuine concern of some of our clients. Any questions, let me know. I'll be hanging around afterwards.